What's up, IDP Army? It's your man, Jordan Rains, back again. This is the IDP Army podcast where we're talking mostly IDP, all fantasy football. This is my third time streaming this week, putting out a pod this week. It's kind of crazy. I haven't done one this many in a row in a while, but it's been really, really fun to have some awesome guests lined up, and I do not want to miss a chance to talk football with some crazy football heads out there. So please make sure before we get into things, you subscribe wherever you're listening, thumbs up if you're on YouTube, comment, interact, leave a review, all that good stuff. We are out there for you. 5-star rating is awesome, but if you don't give it to us, that's fine. We'll live with that. But I appreciate you guys being here. If it's your first time, and if it's not your first time, thank you for coming back. So tonight, we've talked a little bit about free agency. We're going to talk about some winners and losers now that people have put pen to paper. And I have a very special guest, a friend of mine, someone that was one of the last human beings I met before we all went into the dark ages of COVID. My good friend, Greg Thompsett of Cover One Podcast. Greg, how you doing tonight?
Good, man. Good. Always fun to see you. It is weird. I honestly don't know that I don't know that I thought about the fact that Senior Bowl was like the last major social outing I was involved in. I didn't even connect the dots. That really was. And so many people that we saw there, and then everyone went into hibernation since then. So yeah, you're one of the last new friends that I made before the world went into hibernation.
Yeah, that's how I describe you. You're my last bromance I met at a bar. So I'm happy to have you on. You were one of my favorite podcast people to have on last year. I love following your stuff on Cover One. Being only a recent Bills Mafia convert, I'm only 3-4 years deep, but I'm loving it. We've been right. I think I jumped on an appropriate time too, given what we saw this last year. I'm loving that. But tonight we are going to talk about some of our, winners and losers, some of our favorite signings, all that good stuff. It's been wild. It's been hard to keep up. There's been a lot of big signings. There's been a lot of small signings. There's been a lot of in-between signings. We have some guys that are still floating around out there. So let's just go ahead and jump into kind of the recent thing, which just recently was Chris Carson signs a 2-year deal with the Seattle Seahawks. He's back, my man Chris Carson. He gets $14.6 million, which is not super elite running back money, but that's good running back money.
That's surprising to me. I think he got a slight notch ahead of Kenyon Drake. You could have bet me a good chunk of money that he wasn't going to get more money than Drake, so I was a little surprised.
Yeah, Carson with him, it's always the injury, and the thing is, it's always late in the season. People forget really what he did for you, especially in fantasy before then. I mean, and even with missing time, he's always one of the top running backs, points per game basis. He gets the touchdowns. They want to run the damn ball. We know that, and he can catch. So I love this for him. It's continuity. He actually gets paid, which I love to see as a Chris Carson guy. So yeah, I really like this for his fantasy value. It hurts the guys around him kind of, but I like the continuity of the offense, and that's pretty good money. And yeah, like you said, Kenyon Drake, we might as well talk about that as well. That hurt a lot of people that had high stock in Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, all your dynasty Jacobs stock took a shot there. I don't know if they're more confused or now who is the winner out of David Johnson, Mark Ingram, and Phillip Lindsay, but there's a whole lot of just mucked up backfields out there now.
Yeah, it's not pleasant, but I mean, that's kind of what the running backs, landscape kind of is. If you either have one of the 3 or 4 guys that is going to do something, or you have an assortment of guys who you kind of just plug in. I mean, last year I was plugging in J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards on a weekly basis just because I didn't know who to play, but I had them both, so the running back landscape feels like that, and it's going to be even more like that now with some of these, like you said, muddled backfields and some extremely muddled backfields. So be interesting to see how that goes. Other big news today, and this isn't like our main part of the show, guys and gals. We do have some stuff prepared, but this is stuff that's recently just happened just since we kind of talked earlier. We had Juju Smith-Schuster going back to my Pittsburgh Steelers on a 1-year deal, which was interesting, $8 million. Apparently he had offers on the table from Kansas City, Philadelphia, and the Ravens is what I saw. What do you make of this?
I struggle to know if that's accurate, because if you're telling me that he had, from what was reported, somewhere in the range of 11 to 13 million between the Ravens and Eagles, and he chose the Steelers, okay. If you're in a contract year and you're looking to go make some money, I can see that. But it's reported he had 11 million on the table from the Chiefs and went back. if you're from a contract standpoint, I'm not talking about, obviously familiarity, comfort, going back to your team. I respect that by all means. Not the season the way it ended, anybody wanted in Pittsburgh, so I get wanting to run it back. But like, if you're looking to set yourself up for a contract year, that offense might be the. I don't know. He obviously got fed a ton, so he's getting the targets in Pittsburgh. But I just was shocked that the report was $11 million in Kansas City, and he took $8 million in Pittsburgh, and it was a super crazy deal in Pittsburgh with 4 void years on the contract. So it's like a $2.6 million cap hit this year, and everything else is spread out over the next 4 years. So obviously Pittsburgh scraping the last dollar to add talent back like that, but good on him to give a hometown discount, go back and try to run it back, and see if obviously people can stay healthy and have a little bit stronger end of the season.
Yeah, he's young enough to where it's a 1-year deal. We've seen enough. He'll get another offer next year. And if he does, kind of play up, and anything can happen. Claypool, Deontay Johnson, they're there now, but James Washington, but we know how quick guys are to fall off or get hurt or disappear. This is the NFL. What it is today is not what it will be tomorrow and what will be the day after. So there's a world where this works out really well for Juju, where, what if he comes back and what if Big Ben is, has a little chip on his shoulder and he's not as dead in the water as we think. What if he turns him into this, his Drew Brees to Michael Thomas? Like, what if we get that kind of a connection this year because of that? So there's a lot of intangible variables. He's young enough. He's got the brand equity. If he's a social media guru. So he knows that money comes and money goes. And when you're a guy like him and as savvy as him with the kind of wherewithal, I guess you would say, he knows that $1 or $2 million, and that's just, I could never speak of things like this, but he can understand these
I would love to have those problems.
I wish that I could say things like, I'll leave $1 million over here to maybe get, $5 or $10 million over there later. So I wish I had those problems, like you said, but good on him to go back to the Steelers. And I'm really interested to see what the Steeler offense can do, especially if they add a running back, which seems like, the big thing they need to do. Other big signing, we had Will Fuller, a lot of 1-year deals, which we kind of all saw. Well, not want to say we all saw coming. We all pontificated about. Now we've seen it actually play out in real life. With some of these wide receivers, Will Fuller, $10 million to the Dolphins, makes you kind of scratch your head at some of the deals we saw get done earlier, especially with the Patriots. But I love this.
We'll get to that in the loser section.
Yeah, I knew you'd have a bunch for us there. I can't wait. But what do you think about Will Fuller going to the Dolphins? My knee-jerk reaction is just yes. We have a veteran player. People call him just a deep threat, but if you watch him play, he can do more than that. He's a great contested catch guy too, which he's very underrated for. And the injury wasn't even a real thing last year, so we can move on from that. So I love this. He's a great wide receiver.
They mitigated the risk. If you told me that it was the same AAV, but it was 4 years and it was 4 years, $40 million, I'd have more concern. The fact that you're getting 1 year and no commitment after that, and you just get him, playing at his best to earn the next contract, and you limit it, $10 million is totally fair when you look at some of the other deals we'll probably talk about later. That's a very strong deal to be able to snag. The potential that he has there, they could use that kind of deeper threat. And obviously everything's banked on, does Tua take a step forward there? And if he does, that's the kind of weapon that you need for him to connect with. And, I do think, obviously, Fuller's long speed is a great threat, but the diversity of his route tree underneath that to be able to threaten people deep and get those cheap comeback routes, that's easy, cheap yardage. And I think he's going to do really well with that. So, obviously needs to show that last year's health wasn't just the PED use, keeping him healthy. As long as that's the case, that it was, obviously just unfortunately getting busted for something. So many of these guys are using every possible supplement that's right on the fringe to get them as healthy and as strong as possible. So I don't think, a lot of these guys, when you see them get busted, it's usually borderline stuff that's not anything crazy. But a guy who had an injury history in his contract year, I have a twinge of concern that how he was staying healthy that year, or are we ready to step forward here? And he didn't miss any time. So, obviously I hope that's the case. But I think if he's there and stays healthy, it's a grand slam. It's a no risk for them. A hungry guy, $10 million is a good deal compared to what other guys got paid. Got to be happy.
Yeah, and the talent's there, like you said. Let's just hope that, like you said, hopefully it wasn't the PEDs just keeping him healthy. And To that point, let's briefly touch on Tua from a fantasy point of view. I mean, rookie gets thrown to the wolves essentially, and this guy's number one weapon is Devontae Parker, which this time last year everybody loved, but you don't even hear his name spoken right now, and Preston Williams. So when you look at Tua, you have to look at him through the eyes that we kind of had to look at Josh Allen through his first year. He still made some of these guys around him, he elevated them on certain plays, but you can only really do so much with so much when so I think getting Will Fuller, a legitimate player. I mean, he's had like 200-yard games in the NFL. Like this is not Preston Williams. Okay, there's actual stuff to back this up. Like you said, this could elevate the whole offense, and I love that for Tua. I love that for the Dolphins, and I love that for Will Fuller. So let's see quickly before we jump into our main event, kind of talking about our favorites. We also had today, we saw that Justin Simmons got tagged. Apparently, he reached a 4-year deal with the Broncos. I love that. He's one of the best safeties in the NFL. He's great.
Set the new record for highest paid safety.
Is he now? Good.
Yeah, I
saw some people questioning whether he deserved it or not. But, Budda Baker, I believe, was the guy right before him. And I love Budda Baker. But Justin Simmons maybe has a slightly more diverse skill set than
Baker's deal was like 14.75, and I think they gave Simmons 15.1. So right there. But I think Simmons was even better in 19 than he was in 2020, but people act like he took some huge step back, and he was still very, very good. It's just he had an elite season in 2019. There's no reason he can't do that again.
Yeah, I think his pass deflections were maybe down by just a tinge, and maybe he had like one less interception, but he was essentially just as good. What do you have, I believe 90-something tackles, and he's also great in coverage. So, yeah, he deserved every penny of it. Good on him. One of the best safeties in the league. Other defensive moves, we did have a guy that I like, Anthony Walker from the Colts, signed a 1-year deal with the Browns. Browns need a middle linebacker who knows what is going on out there. Anthony Walker is that. I know people love to knock him in coverage, but he's still an impact player, even if he maybe isn't a 3-down linebacker. But that was then. Maybe they play him as a 3-down linebacker now. We don't know what's going to happen with this Browns defense, but we do know that they did add John Johnson, which we talked about the other night on the show. They just added Anthony Walker. Those are upgrades objectively.
Might as well jump in here because that was my team winner. As far as the winners and losers, you add that combination with bringing in Walker and a super underrated one, adding Troy Hill, who is the best rated nickel corner, from a PFF standpoint the last couple of years. So now you have John Johnson, who I thought was the best available safety from a youth and talent standpoint. You talk about they got him at $11 million and Justin Simmons for $15 million. I'll take that. I think that's a nice signing. He's not, Simmons, but he's very, very good. So now you add that in there, Troy Hill in the nickel. Even got Tack McKinley super cheap on a flyer. I think that's worth it to take a stab at and just see what you got. And then just this evening they signed Malik Jackson off the cheap from Philadelphia, so only needing him as a rotational guy where you're still adding him in with already having Richardson, and obviously Myles Garrett kind of plays everything. So now Richardson, Myles Garrett, you add in Malik Jackson to rotate. Tack McKinley gets to play off of those guys. And now behind them, you give Troy Hill in the slot and John Johnson as a safety. I think Cleveland took a major step forward. They already had a ton of spending and talent on the offensive side of the ball, but these kind of deals, obviously Johnson was a big expenditure, but everybody else was a pretty reasonable contract. I think they're pretty smart about how they did. They got Troy Hill $4.5 million a year. Walker was only $3.5 million. Really good values.
Yeah. Those are immediate upgrades too, like we said. I love that pick. Speaking of which, we'll just go ahead and kind of segue in. Our main event's going to be winners and losers, and for the team, the biggest winner, Greg just said the Browns, and I love that pick. Definitely, their defense got stronger. My pick is going to be the Washington football team, and it's just because they added Curtis Samuel, which I love. They didn't really have a second receiving option there last year. We can say it's Logan Thomas, and that that doesn't make me feel very good. And they added a legitimate quarterback in Ryan Fitzpatrick. He has his interception woes, but I'm of the mindset that interceptions held against quarterbacks are kind of a little bit sketchy, especially when you look at some of the teams that he's been put on and the situations he gets put in. I said the same thing with Jameis. Yeah, he had a lot of his own turnovers, but sometimes you're just, when you're behind, when you're playing with some of these defenses, I mean, Fitzmagic had to play with the Jets a few years ago. It's like you have no choice but to throw it deep. And, when everyone knows you're going to throw it deep, that can put you at a disadvantage. Ryan Fitzpatrick gets to go into a team now where he won't be forced to throw it deep all the time. He will get to pick his spots because this defense can hold people down. I love the signing. He's a legitimate veteran. I heard somebody say recently, I don't remember who it was or what they said. They said, "Oh, Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's not a Super Bowl winning quarterback." On this team with Ron Rivera that already went to the playoffs with Alex Smith, who is like running at 65%, and then Taylor Heineke, who's probably 65% of a 65% Alex Smith. I mean, yes, please sign me up.
Math.
Hashtag Matt. I love it. But yeah, I think this is a great signing. Curtis Samuel they added, and I think the defense. The only thing that defense is really missing is a solid middle linebacker. Cole Holcomb. He's okay, but I think they have the chance in this draft class with some pretty good speedy linebackers. They could add that last piece. I love Cameron Curl as well, who they got last year. They nailed their rookie picks last year. I feel like so. That was my big winner. What do you think about the Washington football team? It's crazy they're still called the Washington football team. Like, this team has a chance to make a run, and we don't even have a name for them. Like, what if they go do something?
That'll get addressed here this summer, though. They won't give up that marketing opportunity. I love the Samuel signing. Now, I'm curious, long term. Obviously, keeping Brandon Scherf was enormous, cost a ton, but he was an elite talent. But then you talk about adding William Jackson. That was one of my targets that I wanted for the Bills. Fantastic, speedy corner to be able to add back there. I think they're really putting something together, and I'm curious. Long term, obviously Fitz is 39. That's not the long term answer to much anything. But you combine Curtis Samuel with Terry McLaurin, that's a really dangerous modern receiving core. So I think that's a nice step. Samuel is probably one of my favorite values at $11.5 million compared to other guys who got paid more than that. I thought Samuel was a really explosive addition to them. So he was one of my favorite individual players. And then a couple others that I thought did a really nice job. I thought Carolina did a nice job. You talk about losing Samuel. They were really good on the value end of things. So on the offensive line, adding Pat Elflein and Cam Irving, neither are great, but they got them both cheap. Then on defense, they did a bunch of guys that I like. Morgan Fox from the Rams, Hassan Reddick, bringing in Denzel Perriman. I really like the little pieces that they added in there already with Brian Burns and some of the guys they had with Jeremy Chin. So I think that was a really interesting kind of value play from a free agency standpoint. And then obviously I already mentioned the Browns. I liked from an offensive standpoint what the Chargers did. So going out and getting Corey Linsley and Matt Filer to protect your what looks like a really promising rookie quarterback. I thought those were really nice moves as well.
Yeah. There was a lot of big winners. I love the pick there with the Panthers, adding Hassan Reddick. He kind of gets poo-pooed a little bit, but that's because I feel like he's one of these – he maybe was played out of position. He's one of these kind of hybrid edge guys, kind of like a Brian Burns, maybe a little smaller, maybe doesn't have the power as much. Maybe he's a little more of a finesse guy. He goes back with his old college coach. He gets to play next to Derek. Derek Brown is now that first-round interior player now. He has Brian Burns on the other side. Yetur Gross-Matos, we'll see what happens there. But I like him as a versatile player, especially from an IDP fantasy point of view, because he has the mindset of both a middle linebacker. Like, he's not scared to go get tackles. And now that he's played this edge role and done it successfully, I mean, he had the second most sacks in the league this last year. I wasn't it second or third most. I'll have to double check that. I think I have it pulled up over here. But incredible season from him either way. And when you do a little bit more digging into him, and I was looking at his production profile last night, he's consistently behind the line of scrimmage, too. He's putting up tackles for loss on a pretty consistent level, even when he was playing one of those off-ball linebacker positions. So if he can get into a rotation where, he has a role like he did this last year that works for him, with a coach that wants to use him. And I had a buddy say to me, I said, somebody said something about Yetur Gross-Matos. He's like, Temple just went and got him. They just went and got him. So he played with him at Temple, his coach. He already favors him over Yetur Gross-Matos. So the
modern NFL defenses, guys aren't playing 80% of snaps. It's a rotation. Now you have a chance to have Hassan Reddick, Brian Burns, and Gross-Matos all getting, 50, 60% of snaps, you can put that together into something exciting. And that I think that's a really strong top 3 to be able to have out there. And you should have 2 of those guys in the field almost at all times. I think that's really intriguing.
Yeah, and especially like I said, with Reddick being versatile, he can drop back, into the middle, and he can move things around a little bit, keep things a little bit interesting. So, and we already know Jeremy Chin. I mean, that dude is a beast, man. People forget he lined up in the backfield on that special teams play, and he got like a 20-some-odd yard run for me in my IDP. Yeah. I was like, hell yeah, bro.
Nobody wants to tackle that. Nobody wants to tackle that.
No, he's a beast. I mean, I hope Isaiah Simmons was put on notice with his season this year. So, all right, well, that was kind of all of our big winners. Anybody else you want to touch on? I saw some people talking a little bit of trash on the Bud Dupree signing. I feel like that's a little unfair to Bud Dupree, and that's coming. And I was like kind of a Bud Dupree hater last year, but now that like people are kind of like, yeah, he's what a waste of money by the Titans. I'm like, why? I mean, why? Why you gotta hate on my guy?
So, it's not a waste of money. They overpaid. There's a difference. He's really good. He's going to be good for them. Is he probably going to live up to $16.5 million? Probably not, but he's really good. It's no different than Leonard Williams. Leonard Williams is a really good player. Is he going to be worth $21 million a year? Probably not, but he's really good. So you'll hear me talk about that in the losers category here. Losers in free agency aren't horrific busts. I mean, obviously, in hindsight, we know about those guys who get cut and were just terrible. Yes. Or, sometimes a loser in free agency is Kyle Van Noy. Like, he was good, but you paid him $15 million a year to be elite, and he wasn't. He was just good. So now all of a sudden you cut him the next year. It doesn't mean he was a bust or he was horrible. He played pretty well. He just wasn't elite. So that kind of thing, those are the kind of guys you're going to hear me talk about in the losers, where guys who got paid to be number one threat kind of options, and really they're just pretty good, and they're going to have a really hard time living up to those deals.
Fair. Yeah, I mean it is a lot of money, but that's a position. That's the sexy position on defense. Yeah. Those are the guys who pull money. Bud Dupree has shown himself to be elite. And across from on an elite line, like you said, it'll be interesting to see how he can do playing with lesser, being top dog basically. Like
they still have Jeffrey Simmons. They added Danico Autry. So I mean,
the guy that interior pass rush on this team is going to be pretty. They're going to be crashing in pretty heavy. I
still
really
got Jayon Brown behind him, and Harold Landry,
they kept the squad
off the other
together.
side.
I love Harold Landry. I stand so hard for Harold Landry. I mean, he's like the most not sexy pass rusher in the whole NFL. Like, he is the poster boy of like just a nameless, faceless pass rusher. But I love him. Like, I just love him so much.
They leave Kevin Byard all by himself in that secondary. I'm not sure how that secondary is going to hold together, but that front seven's legit.
They brought in Jenkins. They got rid of Butler. I'm for IDP the last 2 years. Logan Ryan 2 years ago was the defensive back one. And this last year, Malcolm Butler playing that similar role was defensive back 7 or 8, I believe. So do not sleep on the Janoris Jenkins signing, because if he plays in that similar role and, that's kind of like that hybrid corner / safety, which is kind of what they're doing with Logan Ryan. And Janoris Jenkins is no slouch. I mean, he's a great corner. He maybe is losing a step. I believe he's in age 30 now. But that's exactly the kind of guy they've just had playing this position. Logan Ryan, I believe he just turned 30, 31. Malcolm Butler, same thing. So they just went out and got another guy who's a corner that maybe has lost a step, that they're going to play in a specific type of role. So I'm really, really high on Janoris Jenkins from an all-around just IDP fantasy perspective. Yeah, Malcolm Butler, number 3 this year. So, last year, like I said, 2 years ago, it was Logan Ryan finished number 1 playing in that spot. I'm just assuming that Janoris Jenkins is going to play this spot because that's, that just makes sense to me. But what are your thoughts on that signing? And then we'll go ahead and get to the big old losers.
So I'm still unsure. I'm curious to see how it fits. I'll hold on for that one.
All right. Fair. What do you think about Jordan Poyer's? I did a little PSA the other day. I saw his post about kind of overcoming through the alcoholism, and really kind of hit a nerve with me because it's really good to see somebody young kind of going through these things. I feel like sometimes we, especially as people, we want to hide these things from ourselves, but to face things like that head on and be like, look, and I mean, I haven't really said it, but I used to struggle with binge drinking. And that's a form of alcoholism. I remember in college being like, I'm not an alcoholic, I'm a binge drinker. Well, you Google binge drinker, that's a form of alcoholism, ladies and gentlemen. So, it was kind of something I had to just sit back and be like, man, if I'm going to drink, I can't do it like this. And just, having that moment with myself where I was like, I know it feels okay. And maybe people say it's okay, but for me, can look at myself and say, that's not for me. And that's not right. It was really interesting to see, or good to see him put that out there, with a guy with a platform. And it's important for people to see, like, it's not a homeless guy sitting on a bench in a park. It's everybody and anybody can be affected by these things. So that kind of hit a chord with me, and I just pulled him up again here with this, so I just got thinking about it. But good on you, Bills Mafia. You guys got some good ones up there, man.
No, I thought it was really impressive to see him open up like that, just as a person and being comfortable doing that. But, on the field, that's a dog. Like, that man throws his body around like nobody's business. I think you look at the top 20, 25 tacklers in the NFL last year, it's 24 linebackers and Jordan Poyer. Yeah. And, he puts in, that's not, sometimes you have safeties do that for crappy teams who are getting tons of points scored on them, and they just have a bajillion reps and snaps on defense. The Bills were pretty good, so it was, really intriguing there. And I stand for him last year, furious that he didn't make the Pro Bowl. It was crazy. But he's really, really good, just impactful all around, creating havoc, that he's great off the corner on a blitz and really, really impactful there. So certainly glad to see him and Micah Hyde locked up for multiple years to come. We've got the two of them together here for at least 2 more seasons each, and excited to see where that goes.
Yes. Amen, sir. All right. Before we move on quickly, y'all, just want to say, check out the IDP Army, patreon.com/the IDP Army. I'm going to be putting out more content over there, doing some exclusive podcast stuff over there, as well as if you sign up for the Black Ops tier, which is what you're going to want, you're going to get access to the Ultimate IDP Index that is dropping on 4/1. That is a little less than 2 weeks away. That's going to give you access to tiered rankings, production profiles of players, buy-sell tool, trade values, exclusive videos, blah, so much stuff I can't even tell you. I'll just put it this way. When I started this project back around Christmas time, if I had told myself then how much work it was going to be, there's no fucking way I would have even bothered to do it. But I did it. I started it, and the journey just kept going and going and going. I just kept adding more and more to it, and I really think it's going to be something that's going to change the IDP game for forever. It's going to put people in a position to understand IDP quickly. They're going to come in and they're going to quickly assimilate to who the players are, what they're capable of doing, and hopefully it helps usher in a new overall holistic approach to fantasy football, which is kind of what we stand for here on this channel and on this podcast. So, like I said, go check out the Patreon IDP Army, and you guys can get access to that and other stuff. So, back to reality. Let's talk about some free agency losers. Okay, what was your least favorite move of free agency? Just like the all around, ugh.
So obviously it's gotten made fun of plenty, but the Nelson Aguilar signing is just mind blowing. Like it just makes no sense that they overplayed their hand and jumped out early. I was a fan of Nelson Aguilar last year. When you talk about the production he had for the Raiders playing on the freaking league minimum, of course that was a nice value of what they put together. Now, he can make up to $26 million, base of 11 million. They paid him the same of Curtis Samuel, and he has higher escalators than what Curtis Samuel got. Corey Davis got $12.5 million. We were talking about the nice fit of Will Fuller for $10 million. Juju went for $8 million. I loved Marvin Jones as a value to Jacksonville at barely $6 million. The Bills are going to get Emmanuel Sanders for $4 million and change. If I asked you, gun to your head, who's better, Nelson Aguilar and Emmanuel Sanders, was that a coin flip? And they're going to pay him almost 3 times as much. That's a rough one, and obviously it's timing, it's how the market works, it's how things happen. You jump out there, you think it's going to be hot, you haven't even seen some of the higher end guys. Kenny Golladay still hasn't even signed, because the wide receiver market was so hollow. But Kendrick Bourne they got for $5 million. That one wasn't too bad. He's a really nice up and coming guy. Detroit got Tyrell Williams for $4 million. John Brown went to Vegas for $3.5 million. If I put him in a bag and told you get to pick one of Nelson Aguilar, Terrell Williams, or John Brown, would you care which one you got?
I would want John Brown.
And Aguilar is going to get paid triple those other guys.
Yeah,
it's easily the worst contract.
Fair. Yeah, screw the Patriots.
Now, as an aside, obviously I am an avid Patriots hater. I have no qualms with that. The thing I will say is they added some really nice names. Like if you just look at the names on their free agency run, bringing back David Andrews, adding Matt Judon, adding both Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, adding, Jalen Mills is okay. Devon Godchaux, I was a fan of. Kendrick Bourne, I was a fan of coming out. I hate Henry Anderson, but that's this whole separate thing.
Bringing Van Noy back, I think, is kind of low-key underrated.
Bringing Van Noy back, the challenge is, I'll give him, besides Van Noy was probably a nice value. Ted Karras was a decent value. Every other name I rattled off, they overpaid by like 150%. And like that, it's going to be like it was 2 years ago when the Raiders added Trent Brown and LaMarcus Joyner and Tyrell Williams, and they were all the hottest names on free agency. Like, oh man, look at these names. And everybody's like, yeah, but they paid a lot. And then last year, everybody loved Miami's offseason, and now they cut Van Noy and they had to trade Shaq Lawson for 50 cents on the dollar. And, going through there, it's going to be the same thing. This team is going to be way better in 2021. They added talent, but when you overpay for all of it, those checks are going to come due. I'll be curious if half these guys are on the roster in 2022.
Yeah, fair. And it's like, why pay for those kind of wide receivers if you're not going to throw the ball? I mean, we know Cam Newton is not going to be airing it out. I mean, you could have just thrown it to Jacoby Myers and N'Keal Harry. Like, are they that much worse than
you spent two third-round picks on tight ends last year?
Yeah. And you had the two tight ends. I mean, I don't know. I don't understand what the Patriots do. No one ever does. Finally, they're going to actually look bad.
They're going to run the single wing and just, come back, 3 tight ends every single play. It's going to just
Cam. I want Cam to
reinvent
succeed.
The NFL.
Yeah, just rewrite history. Biggest free agency loser. I didn't pick an actual player. If I did, I personally didn't. I couldn't really think of anyone that I overly hated going. Everybody pretty much got paid well. A lot of guys have ended up in situations that are either the same or better. There's nobody I really hated going anywhere. Personally,
obviously any guy who went from a starting situation to a backup situation. If you had stock in Mitch Trubisky, that one probably got hurt a little bit. You were kind of hoping he would hang on to the starting spot in Chicago.
Do we have to like Mitch Trubisky now? Like, is that required?
As a Buffalo Bills fan, the fact that the Bills got him for $2.5 million as the backup quarterback is great. Like, that's wonderful. Jacoby Brissett was $7.5 million. Tyrod Taylor was $12 million. Dalton was $10 million. Cam was up to $14 million. Every other guy in that mid range. Trubisky's in that ballpark. Like, if you want to tell me you like some of those guys a little bit better, sure. He's not that different than those other guys, and they got him for $2.5 million. Hot dog. I'm good by that.
He's got playoff experience too when it comes down to it.
I hope it's an insurance policy that never matters and he never touches the field and he just sits there on the sideline holding the clipboard.
Josh Allen. Josh Allen.
But, the reason you do that is, Josh Allen plays a violent brand of football, and if he were to go down for 2 or 3 weeks, I would feel fine with Mitch Trubisky coming in for 3 weeks and keeping the ship afloat when you have Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley and Gabe Davis and Emmanuel Sanders. He can make that work.
We say that now.
I hope I never have to talk about it.
I hope we never have to actually see this happen.
Probably some of the running backs, they got muddied. Phillip Lindsay and Mark Ingram and David Johnson, they're not winners in this. Kenyon Drake and Josh Jacobs are not winners in this. So that would be where I'd look, because honestly, we make fun of the Nelson Aguilar signing. He's probably going to get similar targets to what he got in Vegas is what he will. He'll probably be the top target from a wide receiver standpoint in New England. So he's probably similar in value. I don't have a lot of... any defensive guy that got signed for big money got signed because he's going to get a prominent role. So there's not a ton of losers that direction. I was a fan of Sean Takitaki coming in this past year, so he probably loses out on that Walker signing. He's probably going to lose some reps. Maybe there's someone in combinations like that was an up and coming guy you thought was going to get some reps in that spot, and now he's not because they signed a prominent guy, someone like that.
All right, two things I want to discuss with you, kind of as they're in my head right now. Biggest loser as a team. I hate to say this, but I feel like it's the Steelers. From a fantasy and a semi-real perspective. So fantasy, we get Juju back. So the target distribution, I mean, I don't pretend to know what's going to happen, but I will say that it looked nicer for Claypool and Johnson and Ebron when I thought Juju wasn't going to be there. All right. Sure. So those are just big facts. We lost Mike Hilton. I did not like that at all. We still have Terrell Edmonds bumping around out there, and I would like us to have a better starting strong safety. I'm just going to say that out loud.
Matt Fowler was one of the best values out there in free agency, and he left, and Villanueva still a free agent.
Yeah, and then we lost Bud Dupree. I like Alex Highsmith, but just because I've seen what this Steelers unit can do the past 2 years, seeing pieces of that unit go away and seeing pieces of Big Ben's body falling apart as he's running off the field, I feel like they're the biggest losers. I feel like they should have things did not fall the way I wanted them to for the Steelers this offseason. And that even goes to, as much as I love Big Ben, I'm ready for Big Ben to not be throwing the football because I want the Steelers to go deep into the playoffs.
How about this for a sneaky fantasy winner? Benny Snell?
They're going to draft a running back.
I think so too.
And I saw what Benny Snell did last year on a couple of my teams, and he did get me a couple of touchdowns once or twice, and I appreciated it. But there were more times when I was like, what's going on over here? And he had opportunity too. So I feel like, I don't know. I mean, but let's hype him up. Now I can trade him. Yeah, Benny Snell, that's the man. What do you think about McFarland though? Because what did they spend, a third or a fourth or a fifth? They drafted him, right?
Maybe, early day 3, maybe. He might have been early 4th, something like that.
He was undrafted.
There are smart guys I know who are big fans of him. I felt like he was a gadget. I don't feel like he's ever going to be a high volume guy that's going to matter in fantasy. I could see him being one of those guys that has some cool breakaway plays here because dude's crazy fast, and that's going to get people to be excited and to pick him up and then to play him, and then he's going to have 4 carries for 23 yards. But if for some reason late in the season injuries fell just right that they had to feed him the ball, he's got the athleticism to do it. I don't see there's any way he would hold up over a season to make that work, but the athleticism is there and is legit.
Especially the way the Steelers use running backs. Like, they use you up. Like, that's just their MO.
There's a reason James Conner hasn't signed yet.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Okay, the other side I quickly want to talk about was Carl Lawson. He is the indie band that everybody's into right now when it comes to pass rushers. He's got all these pressures stacked up on these, just so many snaps. Not a whole lot of sacks to his name. I don't think he has any pass deflections to his name. I think he's got 2 forced fumbles in 5 years, but he gets really great pressure rates, and people are obsessed. What are your thoughts about him going to the Jets, working with Saleh? He gets to play with Quinnen Williams. I like. He gets Saleh. I like that. I like the Jets' defense to be on the field a lot, which I like that. But the reality for me as an IDP person is I haven't seen Carl Lawson put up gaudy numbers, and I like gaudy numbers. I like guys who at least have gaudy upside if I'm going to play them every week. And I haven't seen that from Carl Lawson, but what are your thoughts on Lawson? I mean, obviously there's some upside there because we know Bengals pass rushers, none of them ever really get to their ceiling. So
the indie band comp is hysterical because
it's true.
Once Spotrac put that number out there, and don't get me, I'm huge. I'm close friends with Mike. He's the best in the business. He misses like everybody else. He hits more than anybody else, but he misses like anybody else. And when he put out Carl Lawson's market value at $8 million, everyone had him as, that's my favorite value pass rusher. And I kept telling people for weeks, I'm like, if everyone has him as their favorite value, he's not going to be a value. And of course, he went for $15 million, not $8 million. And the guy that traded with him was the same way. The second guy on everybody's list was Trey Hendrickson. Like, oh, if we could get Trey Hendrickson for $9-10 million, that'd be awesome. I'm like, he's not going to be $9 or $10 million. So both of them, I'll say it separately. I think Hendrickson is set up for failure because he's paid as a number one pass rusher when he produced as a really high motor hustle pass rusher in New Orleans surrounded by 4 other first round picks. And that when you have Cam Jordan and Sheldon Rankins and
Marcus Davenport doesn't count. He doesn't count.
When you have
they way overpaid for him.
Okay. When you have talent all around you, it makes it easier. And so many of his sacks last year were hustle sacks, and that doesn't mean he didn't produce. He did. But now he's going to be all by himself in Cincinnati, where Carl Lawson's gone, Geno Atkins is gone, Carlos Dunlap's gone.
Sam Hubbard don't put up those pressures.
Yeah, and paying him $15 million like he's Aaron Donald or Myles Garrett, he isn't. He just
we have the two most hustle defensive ends in the NFL on the same team right now.
Seriously. So now you flip that. I will say there's at least some potential with Robert Saleh coming in. You already have Quinnen Williams there. You have some potential to bring some pressure. I'm not huge on Jabari Zuniga, but he had some flashes here or there. I think Lawson's maybe slightly better set up to be able to succeed. I would have liked it better if the Jets were able to keep Terrell Basham. He was actually a really nice value signing with the Cowboys. But I at least think Lawson's in a slightly better situation because I think Quinnen Williams at least legitimately takes defensive attention and is going to let Lawson is a more versatile pass rush, repertoire than what Trey Hendrickson does. So I think that's going to translate a little bit better, but I also don't know that he's going to live up to $15 million a year. That's a high investment for a guy who most honestly should be a number 2 pass rusher, not a number 1 pass rusher.
I definitely agree to an extent. And that, I think he, like you said, he's the better pass rusher. When I look at it through a fantasy lens, though, I'm just looking at some just raw numbers here. But, like I said, Carl Lawson has only forced 2 fumbles. I call these impact plays. These are plays that are out that are not tackles or quarterback hits. And for pass rushers, I try not to count sacks because those are kind of baked in. He only has 2 impact plays that are not tackles for loss directly behind the line of scrimmage, which tells me he's focused on getting to the quarterback, which is what you love. That's why he has the high pressure numbers. That's why he has the high quarterback hit numbers. But when you look at everything else he does, 0 pass deflections on 1,800 snaps, only 2 forced fumbles, and both those came this year. No fumble recoveries, no interceptions, which that's whatever. The tackle for loss number is good, but it's still not great. And he played plenty of snaps this year. And then when you look at Trey Hendrickson, through his career, he's played about 500 less snaps than Lawson. Yeah. 3 pass deflections, 3 forced fumbles.
His efficiency numbers are intriguing.
And he's a finisher. He has the same number of sacks that Carl Lawson has on 500 less snaps. He had 50 tackles this year. He played like 200 less snaps than Carl Lawson. Carl Lawson put up right around 50, so good on him on that. But Trey Hendrickson's quarterback hits are there too. So, I look at that, pressures, quarterback hits. The only way I can really attribute a pressure in IDP fantasy is through the quarterback hit and through the sack. So when I look at his quarterback hit and his sack numbers, they're there, just as much as Lawson's are intact. So I think he's getting a little bit poo-pooed on. Sure. Both of them, I think, are, we're seeing a new wave of pass rushers in the NFL right now. Of guys that are getting their shot. We just saw Shaq Barrett got a shot. Boom. He's you know what I mean? So
he's the ultimate example of can efficiency translate? Yep. And can that go? And he is the upside of that. Mm-hmm. The one counter, and obviously, at Cover One, we tried to do a lot of work where you meld together the benefits of analytics and the data with the film and be able to watch and see where it comes from. The biggest warning shot that I had was watching guys like Brandon Thorne, who are the best in the business from a line standpoint, and the Trench Warfare podcast and the work that he does. When he went through and scored the 14.5 sacks that they credited Trey Hendrickson with, he had 3.5 that he wouldn't even have credited to him, and then another chunk that were either coverage sacks, hustle sacks, or caused by other people's pressures, and thought it was closer to 6 sacks that he created. And I think that's closer to his actual value. I think he's going to be a 6 to 8 sack guy, which is valuable. And I think he's going to make impact plays and do a lot of things. I just worry that, that's not exactly what you expect for $15 million. You expect the guy who just had 14.5 sacks. That's what you want.
Fair. You're good, Brandon Thorne. I love that reference. I checked out his charts and all that stuff.
He's
and
fantastic. His sack score numbers are great. If you're looking for efficiency and sustainability in defensive line numbers, I think Brandon's sack score metrics are the best place to look for. It's not predictive, but it can look for what were outliers and say, hey, who probably was a little bit more efficient? And you and I had this conversation before after Jordan Phillips' season. After Jordan Phillips had that season with the Bills, and you looked at what his pressure numbers were versus getting those 10 sacks, it was screaming, saying, hey, this probably isn't going to happen again. He goes to the Cardinals, and he gets 2 sacks. That was a lot more in line with what his numbers were saying. And, I don't think 2 is remotely in the cards. But if you told me that the next 3 seasons, Trey Hendrickson had 20 sacks in 3 seasons, I'd say, yeah, that's about right.
It's going to be fun, and I have a feeling, I'd hate knock on wood, it's probably going to be one of those things that people just argue about all summer, and then one of them's going to pull a hamstring in like a week before the season, and it'll be like all these thought pieces and all these articles and all this, and it'll all be dead in the water. Don't you love it? All right, quickly before we kind of move on to the next thing, I want to tell anybody listening to the podcast, thank you so much. If you guys want to know, we are now an affiliate of Monkey Knife Fight, the 3rd largest daily fantasy platform. We are proud of that. Monkey Knife Fight embodies everything that the IDP Army is. We are disruptive. We are forward thinking. We are about that action. So go over there on Monkey Knife Fight, sign up, use promo code IDP Army. They're going to give you a deposit bonus up to 100% on $50. And that's going to give the IDP Army a little kickback. I've told you all for the last 2 years when I've been doing this, I do this for free. I do this because I love you. Guess what? I'm tired of working for free. So I'm not asking you to pay me. I'm asking you to go make yourself some money and throw a little bit of that money back to me. I would appreciate that if you did that. If not, I'm not going to hold it against you because I'll still be here. So there's my pitch. Hopefully I didn't take up too much of your time. I want to give you guys value. I don't want you guys, I don't know what I'm saying, like I'm begging for money. But I will, Venmo me too. Hit me up. You can DM me. So, all right. Biggest loser for the player. Actually, I just forget that question. What do you think about Yannick going to the Raiders? Let's just get right down to it. There's a pass rusher that, to me, Yannick Ngakoue is the most intriguing. He might be the most intriguing player in the NFL to me because just the consistency of what he does. It's 8-9 sacks every single year. It doesn't matter who's with him. It doesn't matter what's going on in his life. This man gets a fuck ton of sacks, and that's not even a fuck ton, but that's consistency. And if you know, like at the sack at the quarter defensive end position, to hit those kinds of numbers consistently, even though they might not be gaudy, 14, 15, to put up 8 a season. I mean, those are the kinds of numbers guys like Ryan Kerrigan. Well, he pushed up to like 13 several years in a row, but similar-ish sort of consistency. And maybe it's not that elite, but it's good enough to get noticed. The interesting thing about him is people are always like, oh, he's not good at run defense. He really doesn't do a lot in the tackle department, which kills his value for IDP, highlighted by the fact that this mofo had 0 assist tackles this season, but he had 8 sacks. Okay, let that sink into your brain. Okay, this guy didn't have a single assist. If he's not getting to
the quarterback, he just comes.
Yeah, he not worried about it at all. But I love the signing to the Raiders. He's always disruptive too, which is one of the things I love about him. I mean, he's got 18 forced fumbles in his career. He led the league in 2017. He had 4 this year, playing on 2 teams. He had 4 last year. I guess he was kind of on 3 teams last year. But he goes to the Raiders. The Raiders need pass rush help. Clelin Ferrell, if anyone even talks about him in the IDP world, they're wasting your time, okay? Well, because he's dust.
The crazy part is, listen to these names that you rattle off in their front 7, and it's crazy when you talk about the names that are there for what people thought of as either draft potential or free agent potential. Clelin Ferrell, Maurice Hurst, Quentin Jefferson, Solomon Thomas, Max Crosby, Yannick Ngakoue, Nick Kwiatkowski, and Corey Littleton. That's a ridiculous front 7. like the potential and like what people see in those guys that you can go through. And now having, Quentin Jefferson was a great sign. The Bills couldn't afford to keep him. They needed to free up some money to be able to keep the other major free, getting Milano back and Terrell Williams and those guys. They got Solomon Thomas on the cheap from San Francisco.
I forgot that. Yeah, they made moves.
Already having Max Crosby, already having Cleveland Farrell, already having Maurice Hurst. Now you add Ngakoue off the edge there. It's legit. Now their secondary is,
garbage.
Still garbage.
Just call it what it is, Greg.
Jonathan Abram can run around and hit people. He can't cover anybody.
No.
So, they're still going to give up a ton of points behind them, but that front seven's legit. Like, they're going to cause some pressure and wreak some havoc.
I forgot about the Jefferson signing. And now that you say that, I remember seeing a quote from him. He said, the direct quote was essentially, I'm paraphrasing, not verbatim, but he said, Yannick and I, we played together at Maryland. He's like, I know we can do some good things together. I like stuff like that. I like guys that gel because it really, football is the ultimate team sport. And so many good examples of that, especially on defense, where it's not just a guy throwing a ball to somebody, but it's Montez Sweat batting a ball down that Daron Payne catches an interception against Russell Wilson. It's Shaq Barrett getting pressure that allows what's the guy with the grill? I can't think of his name. Carlton Davis to make the interceptions. It's the guy hitting the elbow. That's putting the fumble in somebody else's hands. It's so the synchronicity it takes. And there's something to be said. People are like, oh, the mind meld of Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers. There are guys on defense that I believe they play better together. There are certain guys where their skill sets play off each other. And that's kind of what defensive coaches are trying to do, because you only have a guy that can do so much, but it's what can I put around him that's going to enhance that, which is I call them disruptive defenses. Maybe they're not the best. You don't have the best guy at every, he's not great at this or that. Look at Yannick. He's not going to get any tackles. Who does get a lot of tackles, who does make a lot of hustle plays? Max Crosby. He tries really hard. You know what I mean? So
Nick Kwiatkowski.
Nick Kwiatkowski, great. Another just, lunch pail, hard hat kind of guy. Like, I'm just going to go do it. Jonathan Abram. So now you put guys like that around guys who just pin their ears back and don't care, to make a tackle. Yannick. And the synchronicity of that defense it's very interesting to me. And Carolina, we alluded to earlier, another defense where I'm very interested in how the synchronicity of these players coming together is because it's got a lot of the raw ingredients you like. So it'll be interesting to see what they can do. I see
the question in the chat from Troy about the Lions. And I want to say, so one of the guys for Cover One is Russell Brown, one of the best draft guys out there. And he's a Lions fan, and I certainly have felt for him with some of the bigger name guys that, losing Stafford, losing Golladay, the situation that they're even losing Marvin Jones. I think they were at least smart in what they did in free agency. If you're going to spend, bring back the young pass rusher in Romeo Okwara. If you're going to replace receivers, do it cheap. They got Terrell Williams and Brashad Perriman cheap. It's not the same as what obviously they're not Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones, but if you're going to replace that, do it cheap and then invest in the draft. Jamal Williams, I think is a weapon there. I think I'd rather have him than, Adrian Peterson. I think that's at least some addition in that situation. So I think it's going to be a rebuilding year. They got a ton of draft capital. They're in position to kind of rebuild and restock and then move forward. I don't know that this season's going to be an awesome season. They got Michael Brockers super cheap. I think like a 7th round pick to get Michael Brockers. He's a grown adult defender that can come in there. I'm curious to see Jeff Okudah in year 2. So I don't know that it's going to be a super fun season for Detroit fans, but
is it ever?
Yeah, well, I think at least there can be the idea that there's going to be a plan. It might have to bottom out first and then come back, but I almost think that's better than going out and splurging on a bunch of signings that, if you go out and splurge and give Kenny Golladay $20 million to stay, is that really going to be the reason that you go 6-10 instead of 4-12? It's just that kind of season. I think it's smart that they didn't throw good money after bad, knowing that, hey, it's probably not going to be our year. Let's be ready. Use a ton of draft capital that they collected in some of the trades, and then try to restock going forward. So I at least respect the fact that they have a plan.
Yeah, and I mean that's what you got. You got a new coach. I mean Matt Patricia fucked them up real good. So you just got to make the moves that you make. I don't hate Jared Goff. I mean he'll probably be an NFL quarterback for a while, and he's
I will
probably
say I love the staff that Dan Campbell put together. I'm not 100% sure on Dan Campbell as a coach by himself, but he did a really nice job putting his staff together.
yeah. He got I'm not super. Got Anthony Lynn right, and then
Yep.
who else am I missing?
Aaron, he was the co-defense coordinator in New Orleans, the
Oh,
former
I know who you're
cornerback.
talking about. I forget.
I'm gonna draw a blank now.
Just Google it. Y'all are adults.
But yeah, it's I'm curious to see how that works out the way that they get things together here. But it should be interesting. And if Dan Campbell's running around biting people's kneecaps off, then that's all the more exciting. So now I have what it was. It was they brought in Mark Brunell as a quarterback coach. Deuce Staley is the running back coach and assistant head coach. Anthony Lynn is there. Antoine Randall L is the wide receiver coach. Aaron Glenn is who I was thinking of, but it's Aaron Glenn as a first-time defensive coordinator with Dom Capers as his senior defensive assistant. So I thought that was really smart. Just a lot of guys who can relate to players. Calvin Shepard as a first-time defensive assistant. I think just some smart guys to be in there. Dave Phipp is actually a good special teams coordinator. So I'm curious to see how it comes along. I don't think it's going to be an awesome 2021 season, but I think that they're at least going the right direction to have a plan to bottom out and do it right.
Yeah, agreed. Offense.
The comment by Updog, they have better players on their coaching staff than on their roster. Yes, I wish it was wrong, but it's not.
That's hilarious. I really like Anthony Lynn being there as the OC because I'm a Melvin Gordon truther. I have been forever. And Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler in an ecosystem together were productive for fantasy.
Yeah.
Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift will be productive together in an ecosystem.
I like it.
Don't sleep on Jamal Williams. This isn't a coaching staff that invested in DeAndre Swift. He's there, yeah, but they just added, Jamal Williams for cheap. The loyalty is not necessarily there. I'm not a running back, prospect watcher or whatever, but DeAndre Swift did have some issues last year, I guess you could say, and Jamal Williams has a similar-ish, especially pass-catching skill set. So I don't think that this is necessarily DeAndre Swift's season the way that people maybe want it to be. But I do think that if it is, you can directly link that to Anthony Lynn's ability to get, his best players, which on this team is obviously these two running backs, in my opinion, the ball. So, and especially if who's the wide receiver one right now? Quintez Cephas? That Brashad Perryman. So I have even more confidence that DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams will get the ball. They'll probably bring somebody in or sign somebody.
Terrell Williams. They signed Terrell Williams and Brashad Perriman. I think Amendola's still there, maybe?
Yeah, I believe
he might be a free agent.
He's old, though. He's like 33, isn't he?
Quintez Cephas is there. It's in, Jared Goff is the same as what people talked about Mitch Trubisky. Like, they're not horrible trash. They're just, I don't know that they're going to be primetime starting quarterbacks. So I'm curious where that goes with Goff's contract and what they're going to end up needing to do with that.
Yeah, Jared Goff against a bad defense looks like a god.
Yeah.
But the NFL's defenses are, especially this year, with the cap going down and we got a lot of mercenaries out there.
Yeah.
I think I heard somebody say on a podcast, I think it's going to level the playing field a lot in the NFL this year, kind of bringing that all down, and especially with some of the quarterback shakeups we have too. So it'll be an interesting year.
Yeah, they got about a 2-year kind of run with Jared Goff. He has way too many guarantees in his contract for 21 and 22, but there's zero dead cap in 2023. So, depending on how things go, you have him this year. Next year, he's only got a 10-year or a $10 million base salary. You might be able to get out of some of that. And then maybe if you have a really ugly season, you could draft. I know that people like Sam Howell or whoever's coming out in the next draft. There's pieces there that you'd be able to go in, and it's not gonna be a great run here, but I think they can bottom out and then come back.
Yeah, exactly. And if Jared Goff plays okay, I mean, you can move Jared Goff. Yeah, I mean, if we've already seen him get moved, he was the number one overall pick. So there's value still in that.
There'll be somebody there who had a high draft grade on him and wants to give him a shot.
Yeah. Imagine if Kyle Shanahan had him. You know, I mean, he's 10 times the quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo is. So, in my opinion, what do I know?
You're not wrong.
Oh, hey, that's high praise. All right. Anything else you want to tell the IDP Army before we leave, Greg? And before I say, thank you so much for coming on, man. Like, you are seriously, like, I know I'm lavishing you with praise, but you're awesome. I mean, I love talking to you. I love you on Twitter. I love your tweets. I love the Bills Mafia. I love everything that you embody about being a content creator and person in this space. You're just a great all-around dude. Thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, anything you want to tell the IDP Army before we get out of here?
No, it means a lot, man. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun. We appreciate all the work that you put in and everything that you do. And anybody wants to come find me at Greg Thompsett, hanging out on the Cover One channel on YouTube. We just went over our 10,000 subscribers, so pumped about the group we have building over there. So we have a lot of fun, a lot of film breakdown. I do mainly talk about the Bills, but we have other guys who focus on the draft and film breakdown and everybody else in the NFL. So come on over, check it out. You have a good time.
Awesome. All right, IDP Army, that's all from me. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to sign up for the Black Ops tier of the Patreon, patreon.com/the IDP Army. On 4/1, we are dropping the Ultimate IDP Index. It's going to change the face of IDP fantasy football forever. So don't miss out. And until next time, take it easy, guys.